Christmas time is always chock full of original movies, or more realistically, a bunch of Hallmark movies that all kind of fit the same spot. With the best Christmas movies taking more original stories like Home Alone, Arthur Christmas, and perhaps my favorite, Klaus. A reimagined telling of how the Santa legend came to be, Klaus is a beautiful animated film that will surely leave you easily entertained.
No, I am your father.
And here we go.
That belongs in a museum.
Are you telling me that you built a time machine? Out of a DeLorean?
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
This is Sparta!
Remember, with great power comes great responsibility.
Dr. Grant, my dear Dr. Sattler, welcome to Jurassic Park.
Welcome back to Easily Entertained. I'm your host, Bryson Olson, and I'm here to talk to you about all things entertainment. Today, we are reviewing the Christmas movie Klaus, which came out in 2019 on Netflix. It's an amazing, beautiful animated film that kind of retells the story of how Santa Claus came to be, like the whole legend around who he is. And I think it's a very fun, original story that we don't always see with Christmas movies. And I think that's something I really got to talk about, is the lack of originality in most Christmas movies. Typically, when the holidays come around, Hallmark tends to be the staple. And for some people, that's great. But for me, I am not a huge fan of Hallmark movies. And, you may be kind of surprised. Bryson, this is Easily Entertained. You like virtually everything, and you're correct. I like virtually everything. And even if I don't like it, I understand why people like it. And I do understand why people like Hallmark movies, but this is my show and I get to talk about why I don't care for something. And that with Hallmark movies is definitely primarily centered around their stories, because Hallmark movies are all basically the same plot. They almost all fall after one another, and that gets really boring after a while because every movie becomes super predictable, which is fine, but there's nothing really new to think about. And so it just ends up devolving into more background noise. It's something you can turn on while you're at your family dinner or whatever and just have it in the background, but you don't really care about what's happening on the movie. And I think in those kind of situations, why have a movie on at all? Why not just put on music, or even just like those like little fireplace TV spots or whatever? Like, why not just have one of those? Because every Hallmark movie does kind of follow it, that same basic plot. Like I said, they're usually, when they're around Christmas time, usually like a love story. And there's like a TikTok video that kind of like expands on it even more, which I should find and maybe tag in the description. But basically it's like, okay, we have one person who now lives in this big city and they've really made it for themselves. They're super successful and they go back to their little small town that they're originally from to go see their parents or whatever. It's Christmas time, so blah, blah, blah. And they fall in love with the everyman that they knew in high school but didn't really care for, but now like they're all rugged and they are really attractive and they kind of can just do anything, and they're the everyman, like I said, so they can really just do anything. And the everyman makes some kind of mistake, like almost cheating, or sends a letter and gets it read out of context. And they then make it up, and then, woo, happy Christmas, woohoo, we did it. That's basically the plot of every Hallmark movie ever. And I don't care for that. I don't like stories that are super formulaic and follow the same basic premise. Like, granted, every movie is going to be slightly different, but because of following that same basic plot, you know exactly what's going to happen. You don't even really need to watch the movie. You just know what's going to happen. And even on rewatching movies, even original stories, you can always find something new. Hallmark movies, there's not a lot of new to really discover because they are all basically the same. You're not really seeing anything new with a Hallmark movie, which is fine. It's comfortable and you kind of enjoy it. But I think Christmas movies with a lot more original stories tend to be more engaging. I think they're the best received as well, and they break away from that formula. They rely on other things to keep your attention, and upon rewatching, you can find new things about the movie, about the story, about the characters, and you can still have a really good time while also getting to partake in a really good story that always gives you something new. We talked about it last year, Home Alone. That's one of my favorite Christmas movies. And there are several reasons behind that, because the story is really good. It's a kid home alone on Christmas just throwing traps at these two guys. And that's hilarious. And it's always fun to watch the scene and see if you can see the setup for it, or if there's something new in the background that you didn't notice before that's kind of like a cameo to like Christmas Story or something like that. And the energy around them is super fun, where I love watching them around Christmas, especially with my grandparents, because my grandma will laugh hysterically, and it makes it so much funnier because you get to laugh together. And then you have movies like Arthur Christmas, which is another original telling of the Santa family instead, and what it means to be Santa and what it means to bring joy to children, which is kind of what Klaus is like a little bit too. And then you have movies like Elf, which I don't always enjoy watching. I can watch it like once and then that's it. But it's very original stories that still harness the same core aspects of Christmas, but they provide really original stories that expand upon it not just being Christmas, just a good story overall. Klaus, I think, is a really good example of this. It's very creative in its storytelling, and that's where it really holds all of its charm, is that the story is super original. The main character, Jesper Johansson, he's the son of a postman, and, he's kind of a degenerate, essentially. He does not do anything. He's super lazy, and he thinks he can get away with it. And so kind of as punishment, he gets sent to an island where no one needs mail. What are you going to do as a postman? He's supposed to get 6,000 letters within a year, but he can't do that because he's on this island where all anyone cares about is like feuding. And so they only have one thing to say to each other, which is, screw you. And that's it. Why would they need mail? They don't really have any interaction outside of the world other than in this little town, and they know exactly what they want to say. So he has to figure out what he really wants to do. And he discovers this woodsman that makes toys, but he doesn't really know that he makes toys yet. He stopped making toys, so he has like a shed full of them because he was going to have kids, but he never did, which is kind of sad. But upon finding a drawing, the woodsman, Klaus is his name, he wants to give this toy to a kid because he drew a sad face in this little tower, and so he gave him a toy that brought a lot of life. And so this original story, the postman starts targeting kids. That's a terrible way to say that, but it's focused a lot on kids and bringing joy to kids, and they start to expand on it even more. And so typically, it starts off with very selfish reasons. And so it kind of gets to how you think in most Christmas movies, or kind of a plot like this, where one character, they're kind of in it for selfish reasons. They want to get a bunch of letters done so they can get the heck out of Dodge. But they start to grow more feelings for the town, for the people in it, for the joy they bring. And that starts expanding on the Christmas theme, because that's what Christmas is all about, is that joy of being able to give gifts to people, to see the joy it brings them, to be around the people you love. And that's a huge aspect of Christmas. And to create a story that tells it in such an interesting way is awesome. A big thing in this movie is that one selfless act always sparks another. And I think that's such a good way to think about Christmas, because typically what I notice around Christmas time, I think people start to get usually a bit nicer. They tend to be a bit more grateful for what they have. If they don't have very much, they're thankful for the people around them and for anything they get. And this story takes it from the perspective of kids. This town is miserable, but as kids start to get presents, they all want presents, and so it's all kind of like selfish reasons. But as they get going to get presents, they have to be nice because a kid was picking on the postman, and so he was like, well, if you're naughty, you're not going to get presents from the magical Klaus, because they don't ever see him. And so if you can get them to all be nice, it starts propelling off of each other. First, the kids start being nice to each other, and the kids are all playing, which kind of freaks out the adults a little bit. But then that energy starts being reciprocated with the adults, because the kids are trying to be good. They're also doing really good things to help out their parents, to help out their neighbors, so that Klaus knows he can put them on the nice list and make them happy with a brand new toy. And so it starts expanding to the adults, who also start sharing the energy with each other. And they're like, why the heck are we feuding? This is kind of dumb. We can just be happy neighbors. And like the aspect of Klaus building toys, you take a new spin on the traditional tale where it's like Santa and a bunch of elves, but instead it's postmen and locals that are really helping him. And you have these really beautiful moments where Klaus, like I said, he was going to have kids, but they never came, and his wife eventually got sick, and so he just kind of became more of a recluse. But this allowed him to bring joy back to kids, and almost like, what is it? It's not a cathartic way, living vicariously. He basically lives vicariously by bringing joy to all these kids. And that allows him to still connect and still feel like he almost has kids of his own, but not really. But he starts to grow a friendship with Jesper. And Jesper, of course, because he was originally in it for selfish reasons, he has like this goal thing in his shed that he's going to reach 6,000 letters, and that gets taken out of context eventually, because as he's starting to grow attachment, his dad comes as they reach that point. He's like, well, I'm pretty proud of you. You can leave. And then everyone's like, what? I thought you were starting to like it here. And then, he gets kind of mad. And then we have a more redemption side of things where he saves the head honchos of the feuding families from destroying all the presents. He tries to save them. They're all fake anyways. But he gets this really fun redemption arc, and you see his friendship grow with Klaus and with the teacher and with everyone in the town. It's a much more pleasant place than it was. And he gets really excited about it at one point as well. He's like, arson's down 70%. When was the last time you saw a house burn down? And it's a funny line, but when you think about it, it really is all about the core of Christmas, doing good things for other people. And it doesn't always have to be gifts, but caring for other people, letting people know they're appreciated. And even in a hard winter, a hard season, for workers and things like that, you are appreciative of them and let them know that you still care and they're doing a really good job. And that is the core of Christmas. And I think that's why this story does so good, because it expands on the core of Christmas and tells a good story centered around those cores that lets you discover it for yourself in a beautiful animated way, which I think is the next part we really got to talk about too, because the animation in this show is unbelievable. And this is in 2019, so this is a year following Spider-Verse. And I originally, when I first saw it, I thought they were doing the hybrid Spider-Verse thing, where they were mixing 2D and 3D, because that's very much how it looks. It looks like it's mixing those, but it's not. There are some occasions where they're using objects or backgrounds in 3D just because it's easier to manipulate cameras around that kind of stuff, and the shots can only be as consistent as they are if they use those 3D assets. But the majority of it, especially the characters, is 2D animation. And if you don't know what that means, 2D animation means you're drawing it. And you don't always have to draw every frame depending on the program, but it typically does mean you are drawing frames. It is a lot of work. It's manually done. I believe they took 2-ish years to like fully animate it. I think the core concept was like 4 years prior. I think they released that in like 2015. But different to most 2D animations, like when you think like Lion King, The Little Mermaid, typical Disney style 2D animation, this one took it even further and decided to use a more 3D lighting technique, which was lighting. Because lighting gives a lot of depth to characters, but typically in 2D animation, it's really hard to have consistent lighting because you're redrawing everything. And so having really detailed lighting is very time consuming and not very practical from a feature film standpoint. And so in this film, they figured out a way to use like 3D software. I can't remember exactly how it works, but they could still place lights in a scene and have their characters, their 2D characters, actively using light, which gave it this sense of depth and feel to it and a sense of texture, which was super interesting. They called it painting with light, is like this behind the scenes video called it. I will link that down in the description. But they really did it. Painting with light is probably the best description of it because it's just so seamless with the storytelling. And I think for a really good example that they discuss as well is so when Jesper starts to like target the kids, he kind of seems like almost a drug dealer. He'll like sit in the dark and be like, hey, you want a new toy? Which is like hilarious from like a comedy standpoint, but also like interesting from a storytelling standpoint because he's kind of having the shady behavior. So naturally he's also in the shade. And then when his dad comes back and is like, hey, we can go. You got 6,000 letters. We can get the heck out of here. Everyone else is in the dark and he's in the light. He was the only one in the know about that. And it's this beautiful combination of technique and storytelling that makes this animation so good because you can have good animation or you can have a good story, but it's not very often you always have both. So having both is very interesting and it lets you create a unique story that you feel a lot more connected to, and it lets you be overly expressive like with this lighting technique but not overly cartoony, because typically what happens in like 2D animation, you get a lot of the like stretch and squash type thing, which is like an animation term, which means like usually you have overextending or underextending to kind of over exaggerate how characters move, but that doesn't always feel as realistic. But adding lighting and still like using those 2D techniques makes them expressive without being that cartoony look. And it also allows you to have a lot more unique character language having 2D characters. And character language is typically how recognizable is a character, usually based on their shape, their colors, and in this film, they are able to do that really well because it's 2D. Typically with 3D, you need characters to look a lot more consistent, which sometimes ends up looking too similar. But in 2D, that's not always the case. You can make them more exaggerated proportions and have them look like they still belong in the same world. And I like when they can use that. And that allows you to be a lot more attached to the characters because they're not all the same. There are different characters. There's a strong silent type. There's a very yappy kind of selfish person. There's a sweet teacher. There are sweet little kids. You have a whole range of characters that all have their unique personalities and shapes and languages, and it makes the show so much more interesting. And that's how you take an original story to an entirely new level, is by utilizing such good animation. And especially with the beautiful sound and music and dialogue and everything. There's so many good aspects about the technical side and the creative side, which is why I would say it's probably my favorite Christmas movie. And that kind of leads me into the end of our episode. So don't go anywhere. We're discussing the question of the week. So you can get in on the discussion because we want to know your answers, whether you're on YouTube, Spotify. If you want to go over to our Instagram at Easily Entertained Podcast and answer there, you can do that as well. So our question of the week is, what is your favorite Christmas movie? Like I said, this one may have to be my favorite. I'm a huge animation buff. I think it goes underappreciated a lot of the times. I think people tend to associate animation just with children's films, but there's a lot of adult themes. There's a lot of love and proper storytelling put into animation, even animations made more specifically for kids. I think it's an underutilized medium. And to create a story like this that's so unique and so thematic in its core elements, if that made any sense, in its core themes, it's so expressive on those, and it combines that with beautiful animation that really immerses you in this world and makes you believe that everything belongs in this world, whether it's 2D or 3D. It's amazing, and I think that's why I love Klaus so much. I think it's a almost perfect film, and I don't always use that term very lightly. I think movies can be really good, and especially as someone who's easily entertained, I can really like something, but it's not always going to be a perfect movie. But Klaus is one of those movies that I think is pretty darn close. So that's why it's my favorite. I want to know, what is your favorite Christmas movie? And I will not judge if it's a Hallmark movie. I will a little bit, but it's okay. You can like Hallmark movies. But yeah, go answer our question of the week. And that was Klaus. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you for season 1 of Easily Entertained. We have grown so much in the last year. It is truly incredible to see where we've gone, especially with YouTube picking up lately and Spotify is getting a bit more traction as well. I'm so excited to bring you some more entertainment over this next year. So Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. So spend time with your family and friends. Make your own entertainment. Do whatever you really want. Go partake in some really good entertainment. There are new movies coming out. Go watch some choirs singing some carols. Do whatever. Be entertained. You better be easily entertained. Next week, we'll have a bit of a break just because of the new year, and we're going to get some prep done for the next season. It's going to be really exciting. So have a wonderful new year and holidays, and we will see you back on the 9th. Until then, stay easily entertained.